The dream always began the same way. A corridor of smoke and fire stretched before him, walls groaning under alien artillery. Shadows of civilians stumbled toward him, their eyes wide with terror. He barked commands, dragging them forward, but the air split with a shriek. The Zytherians were closing in. Then came the silence, sudden and absolute, broken only by the sight of small bodies sprawled across the steel floor. He lunged, but they were always just out of reach. Commander Rourke Kane snapped awake, heart hammering against his ribs. The transport's bulkhead hummed faintly, the vibration steady, grounding. His hands curled into fists, scarred knuckles pale against the dim cabin lights. Another nightmare. Another reminder that no extraction had ever left him whole. Across the compartment, Lieutenant Elias Vey studied him with quiet precision. Younger by nearly 2 decades, his face lacked the weathering of years at war. His rifle lay disassembled across his lap, each component cleaned to sterile perfection. His voice carried no judgment when he finally spoke, only an edge of curiosity. "You were talking again, Commander." "Same dream?" Rourke did not answer. He reached for his gear, pulling on body armor as if it were a second skin. The silence stretched until Elias shook his head and reassembled the rifle with mechanical ease. Their differences rarely required words to surface. The briefing came over comms, Earth Command's clipped tone cutting through the low hum of engines. The mission was simple on paper: infiltrate Caltheris Prime, penetrate the Zytherian prison complex, and extract Dr. Adrian Kessler. Simple, except that Caltheris was a fortress planet, and the Zytherians were predators who had never known failure. The scientist was more than a man. He carried within him knowledge of the resonant key, humanity's one theoretical advantage in a war where every other tool had failed. Without him, the war would end as humanity's epitaph. Rourke absorbed the words with a calm that came from years of impossible orders. His gaze lingered on the glowing mission hologram, tracing the fortress's jagged edges. He did not need anyone to tell him what was at stake. Every extraction mattered. Every single one. Elias leaned forward, brow furrowed. "We're dropping into the most heavily fortified alien installation this side of the warfront, with a squad that's half numbers and half morale. Do you honestly believe this isn't suicide?" Rourke's eyes shifted toward him, steel against fire. "Suicide is when you give up before the fight starts. We're not dead until we stop moving." The younger man scoffed but did not argue. He had followed Rourke for years, long enough to understand that once the commander fixed his eyes on a mission, there was no turning him. When the transport bay opened, the forward base sprawled beneath them like a scar carved into alien soil. Once, it had been a stronghold. Now, it was little more than fractured walls and scattered metal, smoke rising where bombardments had gutted defenses. Soldiers moved like shadows, shoulders bent beneath the weight of exhaustion. Their eyes lifted briefly as Rourke and Elias disembarked, recognition flashing, followed quickly by the kind of hope that came in whispers. Rourke Kane had a reputation. He never stopped fighting, even when reason said the battle was lost. Inside the command tent, the atmosphere was heavy with failure. Holograms flickered, supply counts dwindled, and casualty reports stacked higher than ammunition crates. A young officer rattled through statistics, but Rourke cut him short with a look. Numbers did not win wars. Resolve did. He stepped into the center of the tent, his voice carrying without force. "We are not here to hold ground. We are not here to match the Zytherians shot for shot. We are here to take one man out of their claws. We do that, and humanity still has teeth. We fail, and there won't be another chance." The silence that followed was not one of defeat. It was the silence of men and women remembering why they had not yet surrendered. Even Elias, who had questioned the mission's sanity, found himself standing taller. Preparation began with methodical urgency. Soldiers checked weapons, patched armor, and loaded rations. Rourke oversaw every step, his presence pushing them forward, his gaze sharp enough to cut through hesitation. His own gear was assembled with ritualistic precision, rifle balanced, knives sharpened, explosives tested. Each motion was muscle memory, yet every gesture carried weight, as though his hands remembered the failures that haunted his nights. Elias worked in contrast, his methods clinical. He calibrated scopes, fine-tuned the squad's targeting systems, and whispered adjustments into his wrist console. Where Rourke trusted instinct and experience, Elias trusted data. The friction between them was constant, but it was also the reason they had survived this long. At one point, Elias looked up from his rifle and studied Rourke with unusual intensity. "You still think unpredictability is enough? That grit and instinct are going to beat a species that calculates every possibility before we even blink?" Rourke strapped his armor tighter, eyes fixed on the dropship beyond the bay. "The Zytherians can predict every pattern but ours. They'll never understand what makes us fight past the point of reason. That's why we're still here." For a moment, Elias almost believed him. Almost. The squad gathered at the transport's loading ramp, engines thrumming beneath their boots. Storm clouds churned in the alien sky, lightning splitting the horizon. The world ahead was hostile, merciless, alive with enemies waiting to tear them apart. Yet within the dropship, the air was taut with something sharper than fear, purpose. Rourke stood at the front, helmet under one arm, gaze sweeping over the faces of men who would follow him into hell without hesitation. His voice was low but carried through the roar of engines. "We don't walk away from this because it's safe. We walk away because we refused to leave a man behind. Every extraction matters. Remember that." The ramp sealed, and the ship lifted, trembling as it pierced the storm. Lightning flared across the canopy, illuminating the resolve etched into each soldier's face. Elias checked his weapon one final time, jaw tight, eyes flicking toward Rourke. Rourke closed his eyes, steadying himself against the chaos outside. The nightmare still lingered at the edges of his mind, but it no longer owned him. There was only one thought, one relentless truth, carrying him forward: this extraction would not fail. The drop ship plunged deeper into the storm, swallowed whole by the alien night. "You!" The drop ship bucked hard as it cut through the storm front, lightning tearing open the clouds in jagged streaks. The interior shook with each impact of turbulence, yet no one spoke. Each man knew silence was armor, and the weight of their mission demanded it. When the vessel finally broke through the lowest band of clouds, the surface of Caltheris Prime sprawled beneath them, a wasteland of black swamps, ridges that rose like broken teeth, and towers of alien stone pulsing faintly with a green light that seemed to throb in time with the planet's breath. The pilot's voice rasped through the comms. "This is as far as I take you. Any lower, and their scanners pin us like insects." The ship shuddered as its belly opened, lowering the ramp into a curtain of rain. Rourke rose first, his armor already slick with condensation. He strode into the downpour as if daring the world itself to stop him. The squad followed, boots sinking into mire, weapons clutched tight. Elias came last, visor glinting under the stormlight, eyes darting over every shadow. The ship lifted away, engines a fading growl, leaving only the hiss of rain and the distant hum of alien structures. Caltheris Prime welcomed them like a predator savoring the first step of prey. Rourke raised his fist, halting the squad as he scanned the terrain. The swamp stretched wide, punctuated by jagged roots that twisted upward like skeletal arms. Steam curled from pools of black water, carrying a stench sharp enough to burn the throat. He adjusted his rifle and pushed forward without hesitation. Instinct drove him, as if his body could already sense where the danger waited. Hours stretched into a brutal crawl. Mud sucked at their boots, leeches clung to armor, and each gust of wind carried whispers that sounded too deliberate to be natural. Elias fell into step beside Rourke, speaking low. "You know they're watching us already. They'll let us bleed ourselves on the terrain before they strike." Rourke didn't slow. "Let them watch. The longer they wait, the more chances we have to strike first." The ambush came just as Elias predicted. One moment the swamp was still, the next it erupted with movement. Cloaked figures slid from the mist, their forms shifting, insectile limbs elongating, chitin glistening under rain. The Zytherians moved with silence, their bodies phasing in and out of sight as though the world itself bent to their will. Bolts of searing energy cracked through the air. 2 soldiers dropped instantly, armor melting under the assault. Panic rippled through the squad, but Rourke's voice cut through the chaos. "Flares, now." A soldier snapped a flare into the muck, its red light washing over the swamp. For a heartbeat, the air shimmered. Then the aliens flickered into full view, their cloaking stripped by the chaotic light. Rourke drove forward, firing in controlled bursts. Mud spattered his visor as he slid behind a ridge, catching one alien square in its joint, its shriek piercing through the storm. Elias fought differently, precise and economical, each shot a surgical strike. He dropped one alien clean through the skull, pivoted, and dispatched another without wasted motion. Yet when his eyes flicked to Rourke, there was both respect and unease. Rourke didn't fight like a man relying on technology or training. He fought like a force of nature, unpredictable, savage, unyielding. The skirmish ended as suddenly as it began. 4 aliens lay twitching in the mud, their bodies dissolving into foul vapor. 2 human soldiers lay motionless beside them. The survivors regrouped in silence, the storm washing over blood and filth alike. Elias wiped his visor clean, voice sharp. "We can't take losses like this before even reaching the perimeter. You gamble too much on instinct." Rourke reloaded with steady hands, his tone flat. "Instinct kept more of us alive than statistics ever will. You don't fight shadows with formulas. You fight them by refusing to let them own the dark." The younger man wanted to argue, but the words lodged in his throat. He could not deny that, despite the chaos, they had survived. The squad pressed on, guided by the pulsing glow of the fortress looming in the distance. Its walls were not built but grown, ridges of black biometal spiraling upward like the bones of some colossal beast. The closer they drew, the louder the hum became, vibrating in their skulls until it was less sound and more a presence pressing against the mind. At the perimeter, they crouched behind a ridge, rain pouring down in sheets. Organic towers jutted from the ground, their surfaces veined with light that pulsed like arteries. The prison was alive, every wall breathing, every shadow shifting. Rourke studied it with narrowed eyes, calculating. "EMP charges," he ordered. "We crack their senses before they know we're inside." The squad set the explosives, crude human devices bristling with wires and salvaged coils. They planted them against the living walls and withdrew. On Rourke's mark, the swamp erupted in a surge of white light. The fortress shrieked a sound that clawed at bone and the biometal walls spasmed, their glow flickering. "Move," Rourke barked, and they surged forward, slipping through the breach before the alien structure could recover. Inside, the air was thicker, reeking of chemicals that burned the lungs. Corridors wound like intestines, walls slick with pulsing membranes. The sound of dripping fluid echoed with every step. Soldiers moved in tight formation, rifles raised, every nerve stretched taut. They passed chambers filled with human captives suspended in translucent pods. Some stirred weakly, their eyes vacant, while others hung lifeless. Rourke slowed, his jaw tightening. The memories of past failures clawed at him, the ghosts of every extraction that had come too late. His hand twitched toward a pod, but Elias blocked him. "We don't have time," the lieutenant hissed. "We're here for Kessler. You know that." Rourke's glare cut through him. "Every life matters. Don't ever forget that." The moment stretched, tension snapping in the silence, until Elias finally stepped back. "Then get us to him fast, before none of this matters at all." They pressed deeper, following intelligence maps burned into memory. At last, they reached a chamber unlike the rest. Its walls were rigid, lined with spines of black crystal, and at its center was a figure bound by wires that pierced his flesh. Dr. Adrian Kessler hung limp, eyes fluttering, his chest rising shallowly as alien machinery pulsed around him. Rourke approached, every movement careful, every sense alert. The scientist's face was pale, skin mottled, yet when his eyes opened, a flicker of recognition broke through the haze. His lips trembled, barely forming words. "You came." Rourke leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "We're getting you out. Stay with me." The scientist tried to lift a hand but faltered, his voice cracking like dry paper. "The key, it's not just knowledge. They know, they tried to strip it, but it's not data. It's me." Rourke froze, the words lodging in his chest. Before he could press further, the walls trembled with sudden life. A sound like 1,000 claws scraping metal rippled through the chamber. The fortress knew. Elias's voice snapped sharp. "They've locked onto us. We need to move, now. The fortress convulsed around them, walls shuddering as if the planet itself had taken offense at the intrusion. Rourke felt the tremor run through his boots as a low, resonant thrum carried through the floor, pulsing in rhythm with some vast, unseen heartbeat. He tightened his hold on Kessler, who hung limp against him, the scientist's breaths shallow and uneven. The squad formed a protective ring, rifles raised, eyes scanning the shifting shadows that flickered along the slick walls. The light dimmed, then flared again in sharp bursts, and each time it did, new outlines seemed to ripple into existence, alien forms moving just beyond sight. Elias snapped an order for the men to cover the flanks, his voice calm but clipped. He walked close beside Rourke, gaze flicking to Kessler with a tension that betrayed calculation rather than concern. They pressed forward, boots splashing in shallow pools of viscous liquid that clung like tar. The air grew heavier, every breath dragging chemical burn through the lungs. When the first wave came, it did so with sudden, surgical precision. The walls tore open like splitting flesh, and Zytherians poured from the seams, limbs elongated, eyes glowing with predatory fire. Energy bolts crackled through the air, searing the darkness. The squad answered with gunfire, the swampy corridors echoing with concussive blasts. Rourke moved with ruthless efficiency, guiding Kessler behind fragments of cover, firing in short, savage bursts. He dropped 2 aliens in rapid succession, his instincts pulling him through each motion with the kind of certainty no calculation could replicate. Elias fought beside him, his shots sharp, deliberate, each one placed to disable with clinical perfection. Yet his eyes never stopped cutting back toward the scientist, as if measuring every second of risk against the larger war. The battle tore into a frenzy. A soldier was lifted screaming into the air, skewered by a barbed appendage before being flung against the wall. Another disappeared into the shadows with only a strangled cry left behind. Rourke shouted over the cacophony, forcing the squad forward. "Stay together. Push through." Kessler stirred weakly against him, whispering words broken by pain. "The key, they wanted it extracted. They couldn't, because it isn't separate, it's bound to me." His eyes locked with Rourke's for a fleeting second, fever bright with desperation. "If I die, so does humanity's chance." The words carved deeper than any alien blade could. Rourke gritted his teeth and pushed harder, forcing the squad through a corridor that shook violently as if alive. A bulkhead ahead collapsed in a spray of jagged shards, sealing off their intended route. Elias cursed under his breath, scanning the alternate passages that twisted like veins in every direction. "This way," Rourke growled, choosing instinct over hesitation. He forced the squad down a narrow artery, firing blindly into shadows that twitched with movement. The aliens pursued, their shrieks reverberating like a storm of blades. Explosions lit the walls as soldiers tossed grenades, rupturing the biometal, leaving gaping wounds in the structure. Acid sprayed from the ruptures, eating into armor, and one man collapsed screaming as his visor dissolved in hissing smoke. Elias dragged him forward, only to be forced to let go when another strike split the soldier apart. For every step gained, the squad paid in blood. At last, they reached a junction chamber, a vaulted space where the ceiling arched high and spines of crystalline material jutted like the ribs of some dead giant. The squad formed a defensive circle, breathing ragged, weapons trembling with heat. Elias called out, his voice edged with frustration. "We can't keep this up. Every meter costs us men. The fortress will swallow us whole before we ever see daylight again." Rourke set Kessler down against a crystalline ridge, kneeling beside him. The scientist's skin was clammy, but his eyes still burned with that unsettling intensity. Rourke spoke softly, though the chaos pressed close around them. "Stay alive. That's all you have to do." Elias crouched nearby, his jaw set. His gaze slid between the scientist and Rourke. "You don't see it, do you? He's not just a man. He's a weapon. And weapons don't always belong on the battlefield, they're too dangerous to trust." Rourke turned, his expression hard as stone. "He's not a weapon. He's a man who holds the only chance we have left." The chamber shook violently as more Zytherians poured from the upper walls, their claws scraping along the spines, eyes glittering. The squad opened fire again, the space exploding in sound and fury. The aliens fell, but for every one that collapsed, another replaced it. Grenades detonated, showering the chamber in fire and acidic gore. Through the chaos, Rourke fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. He leapt across debris, tackling an alien with his knife, driving the blade repeatedly into its chitin until the creature shrieked and dissolved. His armor was slick with fluid, his breathing harsh, yet his movements never faltered. He was instinct made flesh, unpredictability given form, and in his wake, soldiers rallied with renewed desperation. Elias fought just as hard, but his mind was elsewhere. He saw the scientist, saw the truth in his words, that the key was not information that could be stored or safeguarded, but something living, fragile, and dangerous. To keep such a thing alive was to gamble with the entire survival of their species. And Elias had never been a gambler. During the retreat from the chamber, when the squad forced open a new passage and shoved Kessler forward, Elias made his choice. He triggered his wrist comm, his voice low enough to be lost in the storm of gunfire. "Command, it's Vey. The key isn't data. It's fused to Kessler. Extraction is unstable. Termination might be the only way to secure the future." Static answered, then the faint, cold voice of Earth Command, "Understood. Do what you must." The words settled like lead in Elias's chest. His eyes lifted toward Rourke, who was driving the squad forward with sheer will, dragging them through the living maze. For all his ferocity, the commander was blind to the larger danger. Elias believed himself the only one willing to see it. They broke into another corridor, sprinting toward what intelligence marked as an exit route. Ahead, the walls narrowed, then collapsed suddenly, molten strands sealing the way. Elias hesitated, fingers brushing his detonator. A single charge could bring down the passage entirely, ensuring no one could escape with the scientist. His thumb hovered, trembling. Rourke noticed the pause, his instincts flaring. He lunged and grabbed Elias's wrist just as the lieutenant primed the device. Their eyes locked, fury and betrayal flaring between them. Rourke's voice was a growl torn from deep within. "You'd doom us all?" Elias met his glare with equal fire. "I'd save us all. One man's life is not worth humanity's extinction. You can't see past your ghosts." The struggle was brief but violent. Rourke ripped the detonator from his grip, slamming Elias against the wall, the squad staring in disbelief as their leaders fought not the aliens, but each other. Rourke's fist drew blood from Elias's mouth, yet he could not bring himself to finish it. With a snarl, he shoved him back and turned away. "You follow me, or you die here. Make your choice." Elias wiped the blood from his lip, eyes burning with conflicted rage. He said nothing, falling back into step, but the fracture between them was carved deep and permanent. Kessler coughed weakly, words scraping out of him. "If unpredictability is our strength, the key will magnify it. That's why they want it gone. That's why you must get me out." The alien fortress howled around them, the sound of the hive rising in furious chorus. Rourke pulled the scientist tighter against his side, his eyes forward, his voice steady despite the storm. "Then that's what we'll do." The squad pushed on, battered and blooded, toward the extraction point. Behind them, the fortress sealed its wounds, and ahead, the swarm gathered like a tidal wave waiting to crash. The air reeked of acid and death, yet for Rourke, only one thought remained, pulsing with each beat of his heart: this extraction would not fail. The tunnel opened onto a wide expanse, a basin carved into the earth and encircled by jagged ridges. Beyond its edge, a platform jutted into the storm, its surface scorched from earlier bombardments. This was the extraction point, fragile, exposed, but the only chance they had. The wind howled through broken beams, carrying the stench of sulfur and the distant clatter of claws on stone. Rourke adjusted Kessler's weight across his shoulder and scanned the perimeter, every muscle braced for the inevitable swarm. The squad fanned out automatically, each man dragging what remained of his strength into the defensive ring. Faces were hollowed by exhaustion, but their eyes burned with a fire that only desperation could forge. Elias moved among them, steadying their lines, though his gaze never strayed far from Rourke. A bruise darkened his jaw from their earlier struggle, but his voice carried authority, and the soldiers obeyed without hesitation. Kessler stirred, his voice little more than a rasp. They'll come, all of them. They won't let me leave. Rourke crouched low, gripping the man's shoulder. They'll try. That doesn't mean they succeed. His words were iron, hammered into certainty, even as thunder rolled across the sky and the ground trembled with the approach of the swarm. The first shapes emerged through the mist, scores of Zytherians crawling along the ridges, their eyes burning like embers, their movements synchronized as if guided by one vast and merciless mind. They descended with the inevitability of a tide, clawed limbs digging into the earth, shrieks tearing across the basin. Rourke barked commands with the clarity of a blade. Mines were placed along the approaches, tripwires rigged with salvaged explosives, turrets calibrated and locked. Crude, improvised defenses that would never match the elegance of alien design, yet human ugliness had always had its own kind of brilliance. When the first wave hit, the ground erupted in fire. Limbs shattered, carapaces split, and the air filled with the acrid smoke of alien bodies dissolving. The soldiers cheered, the sound raw and short-lived, because the swarm kept coming. Elias fought like a man possessed, his rifle spitting precision, his movements efficient even under crushing pressure. Yet his mind circled the same thought that had haunted him since Kessler's revelation. To save humanity, sometimes sacrifice was the only path. Each glance at the scientist filled him with conviction and doubt in equal measure, a weight that grew heavier as the battlefield consumed them. Rourke fought on instinct, moving like a storm among his men. He dragged one soldier back into cover, cut down 2 aliens with brutal close-quarters strikes, and hurled a grenade that collapsed an entire flank of the ridge. His body screamed with exhaustion, but the fire in his eyes never dimmed. He lived inside the chaos, thrived within it, and his unpredictability turned every strike into something the Zytherians could not calculate. The aliens pressed harder, their numbers doubling, tripling, the hive adapting to every defense. The mines became useless once detected, the tripwires torn away, turrets ripped down by overwhelming force. One soldier after another fell, their cries swallowed by the storm. The basin reeked of blood and acid, mud churned into a foul slurry beneath their boots. Elias found Rourke during a brief lull, his chest heaving, rifle hot in his grip. His voice cut through the storm. "He's too dangerous. If we make it out with him, Command won't be able to control it. You know what they'll order. We can't let him live." Rourke shoved another magazine into his rifle, his tone sharp enough to slice steel. "He's not your decision to make. He's a man, not a weapon, and I won't throw him away to make the war easier. You'd risk the whole of humanity on one man?" Elias's voice cracked with fury, frustration, perhaps even fear. "You're blinded by your need to make up for the lives you lost. You can't see that saving him might doom us." Rourke rounded on him, rain streaking his scarred face, eyes burning like coals. "And you can't see that without him, we've already lost. Humanity isn't about cutting away the parts that are inconvenient. It's about fighting for every life, no matter how heavy the cost. That's what makes us what we are." The clash of their wills was cut short as the ridge above split open, releasing the largest wave yet. The Zytherians poured down in a black torrent, shrieking, claws flashing in the stormlight. The basin became a slaughterhouse. Rourke rallied the survivors with a roar, drawing them into a last stand around the platform. Ammunition dwindled, blades were drawn, and combat collapsed into brutal grappling. Rourke wrenched an alien's limb from its socket and drove it through another, his armor cracked and bleeding from a dozen wounds. Elias fought back-to-back with him, their earlier fury sublimated into raw survival. In the midst of the chaos, Kessler collapsed to his knees, eyes wide as light shimmered across his skin. His voice rose above the din, weak yet resonant. "The key, it reacts to chaos. To unpredictability. It amplifies what makes you human." Rourke looked at him, a flash of realization cutting through the haze. This was the moment. Humanity's stubborn refusal to yield was the key's ignition. He pressed a hand to the scientist's shoulder. "Do it. Give them the one thing they can't control." Kessler's eyes burned, his chest rising with final effort as energy rippled outward, a pulse that vibrated through the storm. The resonant key awakened, not as a weapon of destruction but as a disruption. The air trembled, the ground shivered, and the swarm staggered mid-charge. Their movements faltered, synchronization broken, the hive's rhythm shattered. For the first time in centuries, the Zytherians hesitated.